Welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast, your place for all things happiness. I'm Simona Costantini, host of the show, and I'm so excited and grateful to be on here with you today. In case we haven't met yet, I'm a corporate dropout turned life coach and podcast producer, and I now run a 6-figure podcast production agency out of my home. The Happiness Happens podcast is your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration to have a more fulfilling day every day. I've been having conversations about happiness with thought leaders in the industry for more than 3 years, and each week I bring on incredible guests to understand what happiness means to them and tangible ways to transform our mindset and ultimately our lives. I know you're going to learn something valuable today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and join me for this amazing conversation. Hello, my friend. Welcome to this episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. I can't even express to you my extreme excitement to have Sonia on my podcast today. When her and I first got connected, we had a bit of tech issues when we first started our recording and all of that. So we actually had to pause and stop what we were doing, and we had to re-record on a different day. Now, we both believe in divine timing, and we both believe that things happen in the exact way that they are meant to, that they are supposed to. And I truly believe that this conversation probably would have not turned out the way that it did if we just powered through on that first time. I have to say, she is one of the most radiant souls that I have ever met, that I have ever seen. And you're just going to hear her sunshine literally through the microphone. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will also get to experience it on video, which is amazing. Now, I'm going to introduce Sonia to you in just a second, but I want to tell you a little bit about what we're talking about in today's episode. In today's episode, we're talking about coming back home to your body. We're coming back home to this place of neutrality. We're talking about living outside of fight or flight. And we're talking about really honoring our desires and honoring what we truly want out of this life without shame, without judgment, without fear. Now, this conversation for me was a game changer in helping me shift my mindset around certain things that I've been experiencing and going through over the last little bit. And she helped bring me so much clarity and validation in our thoughts are allowed to be our thoughts, and we are allowed to live our life the way that we want to, right? We have all of these conditions that get put on us every single day, all of these expectations and all of these things that we quote unquote should do, that we often forget what it is that we even really want to begin with. So let me introduce Sonia to you all today before we get into our conversation. Sonia gave up her skyrocketing corporate career and began searching for a new path that resonated with her core. She transformed her life through deep analysis, education, determination, and willpower. Through her journey, she's uncovered a deep passion for wellness and a driving desire to help other people. She has made it her mission to help others live their best lives through online talks, speaking engagements, television appearances, and coaching. She is a TEDx speaker and an award-winning mindset and wellness expert enthusiast. She has an amazing sense of humor, and she's so warm and so open about her own journey. And all of these have earned her a reputation as an unstoppable force in the wellness arena. And she's also the author of her new book, which is called I'll Start Again Tomorrow and Other Lies I've Told Myself, which we're also going to talk about in this conversation. So thank you for joining me. If this conversation resonates with you, share it with a friend. Take a screenshot. Let us know that you're listening on social media. Tag us both. Reach out to us. Let us know what you loved. I love hearing from you. And I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. So let me just stop talking so that you can get right into it. Thanks for being here. Sonia, welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast. I just can't even explain how excited I am to have you on my show. And the fact that we get to have this conversation today, I'm really fired up.
I am so excited, Simona. Honestly, thank you so much for having me. And I feel like it was gray skies, dark and gloomy outside. And then the moment you popped on my screen, I was like, wait, suddenly the sun is shining. It literally is, but also you are a delight already. And so I'm so excited to I'm going to go there with you today. We're going to do the whole thing. We're going to unlayer, we're going to unpack. Let's just dig deep.
Oh, I'm so excited. It's like literally, it's my favorite thing to do. And thank you so much for saying that. That is
Of
so
course.
nice. And I feel the same way about you. I think what is going to be so great about this conversation is how much our energies align
Yes.
in so many different ways.
Yes.
And I feel like even though we only have known each other for literally 2 times, quote
Yep.
unquote, in person, I just feel like we just kind of get each other on an energetic level. And so
It's
that
so
makes
true.
for amazing conversations.
I know it does. And I feel the same way. So I'm actually a bit goosebumpy about this. Yeah, I'm ready. I think it's
Me
going to
too.
be so fun. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, okay, let me ask you then my first question that I always ask all of my guests as soon as we start off the interview. And I feel like it really sets the tone for our conversation. And I never really give any warning for this question. So, what does happiness mean to you?
Ooh, what does happiness mean to me? Yeah, that's potent. Okay. I think if I had to really boil it down to a concept, I'd say that happiness for me, I think just feels like this ability to be able to really marinate
Hmm.
in the good in your life, right? Actually be able to feel the joy, the big, the small, the gratitude, the appreciation for what is, not what could be.
Hmm.
I think to me, one of the hardest things in my life has been actually cultivating that feeling. The knowing is one thing, the rational knowing that there's a lot to be thankful for, there's a lot
Hmm.
to be happy about.
Hmm.
That exists, fine. But the integration of that knowing into your body,
Hmm.
where you can feel it in yourself, in your soul, in your cells, I think that to me feels like honest happiness, right?
Hmm.
When it isn't about what is circumstantial, that is giving you that hit of dopamine that you need, but rather that you have an understanding of, the goodness within and everything that you're experiencing and an understanding around sort of your journey and your purpose and your connection to self and connection to others and whatever else it is that you believe in. I think for me happiness really feels like when I have that quiet knowing, that's when there's peace.
Hmm.
And I think there's so many different words that we can use when it comes to happiness. Is it
Hmm.
peace? Is it joy? Is it what is it? But I think for me, it's like as long as it's that quiet experience within, as opposed to what I spent my entire life doing, which is chasing happiness out there, outside of myself. I think that's sort of where the real understanding begins.
Mm. Okay. You said so many amazing things in there that I want to like dissect all of them on their own. And I think that, okay, I'm going to hold on to this idea for a second of, wanting to find happiness outside of ourselves because it's going to tie into what we're going to talk about later, which is going to be more of the body image side, the patterns and health and wellness. I did want to caveat though and share two things with you. So, one of the reasons why I just know you and I align in so many different ways, and I feel like we actually, if we ever met in person, I'm sure we would have amazing conversations about this
Yes.
and about so many things in general. But one thing that I've learned over my own happiness journey was that trying to define happiness is almost impossible because it means something so
Yes.
different to everybody.
Absolutely.
But what you said in there was happiness is that inner peace. And that's actually how I define happiness is by inner peace because I feel like when our bodies are in a place of neutrality, when there's no
Mm-hmm.
fear, there's no anxiety, there's no living in the past, worrying about the future, it's that deeper inner knowing. And even if you don't live in that place within yourself every single day or every single minute of every single day, just knowing that you can calibrate back to that place of peace, I feel like lends itself to really exercising and building that happiness muscle.
Oh my goodness. I feel like we could just take this one nugget
Let's do it.
and expand on it for the rest of this episode
I
because,
know.
Simona, it's amazing. And there are no coincidences, but what we're talking about, this neutrality, is really something that has been coming up for me since I released my book. And it's
Mm,
so unusual, right? Because you know you're not prepared for what's to come, but you think you sort of have an understanding of the arena that you're stepping into. And then,
Yeah.
you venture out into new territory. And every time I find that I'm forced to or excited about leveling up, to the next project, to the next thing, to the next stretch for myself, I also find, all of my stuff comes right back up. Now, maybe not through the same lens where it's, the hamster wheel of weight loss, but a lot of those cells in my body that have held on to the fear and the limiting beliefs and the cycles that I have gone through, you want to sort of believe that, you're fully healed, and you come up against all of your stuff again. And the piece that I have been hanging on to the most lately is, how do I get really neutral about it again? How do I
Mm.
unhook myself again from what's going on out there to be able to find the peace within again, so that yes, I can have goals, and yes, I can have dreams, and yes, I can want to make an impact, but that the sense of self that I possess is not hinging on anything that is other focused, right?
Mm.
Other focused in any way. And I'm inherently someone who fawns. I'm not anymore, but my fight, flight, fawn response, my fawn response is significant. And I'm really working through right now coming back to this place of neutrality
Mm.
so that I can come back to who I really am, because it's in that alignment that, okay, I'm connected back to myself. I can feel authentic Sonia again. I have that peace of mind. That's again where I find that happiness really lives. And so I love that you use the word neutrality, because it's the piece that I am really sitting with day in and day out today, where it's like, how do I come back to neutral?
Mhm.
If it's good, how do I come back to neutral? If it's bad, how do I come back to neutral so that I can stay out of the vortex,
Yeah.
you know?
This is the thing that I have been struggling with lately, is sitting in this place of like the vortex, if you will, because I'm in a place in my life, I would say more in my personal life, where I'm hanging on to potential and I'm hanging on to shoulds.
Mm,
And I don't know how to decipher if the voice that I'm hearing
yep.
within my own mind is a legitimate voice,
Yes.
if it's fear, or if
Yep.
it's ego.
Oh,
I can't figure it out.
it is so
I'm
challenging.
exhausted.
Yeah, and it is so challenging, and it is so exhausting, and I can't tell you how much I relate to what you're sharing,
Mm.
because in teasing out the noise and really filtering through it, it can be such a challenge when you're so heady, right? Like I'm a heady person.
Yes.
I can convince myself of essentially anything. And most of the
Same.
time I can convince myself of selling myself out. Like
Mm.
I am very good at narrating, and I can understand how that feels so difficult for you, because it does for me as well. And one of the things that I'll say that has been an interesting exercise for me to get better and better at doing is, one, really strengthening that mind body connection. Obviously, the
Mm.
what is my body saying, not what is my like 18 versions of narration saying. The other piece of it also is bringing myself to a place of that neutrality that's really palpable through whatever means necessary, whether that's inversion tabling, whether that's breath work, whether
Mm.
that's meditation, whether that's sound therapy. I'm currently doing something called the Safe and Sound Protocol, which is music based therapy. And what I find is that in allowing myself to experience nervous system regulation, like actual nervous system regulation, I'm able to then think about the things that you're talking about, where you're like, well, is it because of fear? Or is it because of this? Or is it the truth? Or like, who's saying what? And I don't know which version of me is responding here. I'm able to discern fact from fiction a lot better.
Mm.
And what I found is that I believe and I am so heady, but that headiness, that over narration gets really amplified by a dysregulated nervous system. And the
Mm.
fact that I am, for the most part, predisposed to being in fight or flight.
Yeah.
And if I can do the work to connect back in with self and drop my system into a better, more harmonious state where I'm not actually activated, and again, not in my head, but in my body, I'm able to tune in to the nuance of what it is that I'm experiencing in my head differently. And then the perspective shifts and the answers come and there is clarity. Now, the clarity goes away pretty quickly because I have the capacity to be pretty heady, again, as we said. But the moment, the nugget is revealed. And so I get how hard it is, but I would encourage you to maybe explore different ways that you can feel like you're dropping in further
Mm-hmm.
to be able to discern where does the real you stop and where does the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the noise start.
That is so powerful. And I think what makes me the most nervous about doing something like that is the fact that I'm so fearful of what
Oh,
the answer is going to be.
I know.
Because I'm like, it could either be this and that will make me happy or sad. And it can be this, which will make me equally as happy or
Yes.
sad,
Yes.
And it's kind of
Yes.
like, I really try not to live my life with regrets because I don't
No.
think that that's a place we ever want to be. And I really don't
Yeah.
have any regrets in
No.
my life. But I do have a lot of like, what ifs? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What if X, Y, and Z didn't happen? Or what if X, Y, and
Mm-hmm.
Z did happen? But then it's also remembering that what's for you is for you, and what's not, what's meant for you will come, and what isn't will fall away, right?
It's yes, I was just going to say, right? It's like the what ifs I think are, a light little, sliding doors moment that we can have with
Mm,
ourselves, but I think in knowing that what's meant for you isn't going to miss you and that again if you can come back to that neutrality that
mm-hmm,
you mentioned, the this or something greater, the to this or something higher mentality without the fear gripping your soul, which I'm saying as if I have mastered. Absolutely not. This is a daily, moment to moment, minute to minute practice for myself.
mm,
The how do I stay in alignment and integrity with core Sonia? It is a momentary work in practice, but I think, when you talk about I don't really believe in having regrets and it's just the fear feels, like it really sort of, it keeps me a bit stuck. I think it's, okay, then how do we surrender further? How do
mm.
we trust further? How do we get so neutral with the outcomes that we think that we need that are going to bring us to the destination that we think we need to go so that it's to that or something better or something greater? And I don't have the answers, but to be continued, I guess.
Exactly. That's going to be your next TED Talk.
Exactly. Oh
Which I was
my.
watching your first one, and I love the way that you opened it, and I love the way that you closed it. I
Thank you.
believe you opened it with like who feels happy or like who is
Mm-hmm.
truly happy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe, if correct me if I'm wrong, please, that you closed it with along the lines of like essentially who are you when nobody is looking?
Yes, you got it. Absolutely. The closing line is who would you be if no one was watching?
Mm,
And just, even when I say that line back to myself now, I still sort of have the same emotion come up, which is, God, isn't that the most haunting and powerful question we can all ask ourselves? And the
mm,
one simple truth that we get pulled away from in every moment of our lives in that tug of war of existence that we have around, as I said, being other focused, internally focused, chasing the things, doing the things, performing, social media, all of it. It's like, how do you find a way to come home to who you really are so that you're in the driver's seat of your life rather than following the wrong GPS? And it's tricky, but it's powerful work for sure.
I love that. That's so
Yeah.
good. I want to shift a little bit. I want to talk about your book because
Mhm.
I love the title of your book. I'll start again tomorrow, and other lies I've told myself. Same,
Mhm. Same,
same.
same. Guilty.
So tell me, where were you in your life when you decided you wanted to create this, like write this book?
It's an interesting question. Actually, that not a lot of people have asked me.
Hmm.
They've asked me a lot about my journey, but less about making a decision about writing a book. And it's not straightforward, which is, I guess, the story of my life. I, you know, had gone into fitness and nutrition after pivoting my career heavily from the corporate world and, ventured down that path for several years, really found a footing in the media space here in Canada and started doing more and more TV segments. I opened up a fitness studio and was really just, neck deep in the world of fitness and nutrition and being an expert in that space. I found more and more that, this idea of these TV segments that I once coveted, where I was like, I don't know, maybe one day I get to be on TV and like, could it even be like, oh my goodness, that novelty that I carried around, being an expert on TV, not only sort of quickly dissipated, but it shifted because I found myself really longing for the ability to say more. These TV segments are like 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And in the beginning, they were so fulfilling. And then very quickly, I was like, I mean, you could literally replace me with any other rando, and it would essentially be the same thing with a little bit of a different haircut and a little bit of different personality. But like, this is not what I have to offer. And ended up going through fertility treatments, ended up having my first child, experienced postpartum depression. And 6 months into my maternity leave, I was like, I have to go deeper. I have to be able to find something that is going to give me that feeling inside, like I'm living more of my purpose. And I don't ultimately know what my purpose is, but I knew that it was time for me to go deeper into that understanding, and that, going back to a life of, yes, coaching and fitness and nutrition and all that one-on-one work and group work, but then also, the fitness studio and then also the TV segments was just, it wasn't speaking to my soul enough. And I first decided I wanted to write a book as a means to an end. I wanted to become a speaker. And I was like, well, I'm not a doctor and I'm in the wellness space. And so I'm going to need something to legitimize my credibility, because otherwise, like, well, I'm just a rando again, who just like, is like, listen to me. I promise I have interesting things to say. And so I was like, you know what? I'll write a book and then I will have something that's tangible and I will be able to then go, really push myself as a speaker out there. And so like, let's go. Delusionally thinking that I would be able to just like vomit out a book, right? Like just was like, I got this. Did not have this, let me tell you. It was, years of writer's block and the push pull around, what am I saying? What do I want to say? How am I saying it? Moments of inspiration, things that would come together. And then, just the feeling of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back the entire time. And I wrote many iterations of the book. And finally actually got to the place where I was going to release the book right before COVID. It was actually 2 days before COVID that the book was supposed to come out. And then the zombie apocalypse happened. We ended up having like a glitch in the pre-order system or something or another. So we deferred to get that sorted out. In the meantime, COVID really hit, like the world shut down. And everybody became a health and wellness expert online then, right? It was like, here we go. The masses have arrived. And so I held on the book. I was also, again, now postpartum with my second child during the pandemic, 3 months out, and was sitting on this book that I was like, okay, we'll figure out the right time for it to come out. We'll see. Unlayered, grew, journeyed, the pandemic, second child, everything came into the mix. And who I was coming out of the pandemic felt very different than who I was going in. And not for any sort of big glaring reasons other than I got to know myself deeper. I got to call myself out further. I got to dig a little bit into the mess. And that's sort of where the TED Talk was birthed. Coming out of the pandemic came the TED Talk. And coming out of the TED Talk, I was like, I hate the old book. I hate it. I'm going to slice it down. I'm going to send it into the world as like weird free PDF programs and stuff. And I'm going to do something else with the content. I hate the book because it wasn't it wasn't harmonized the way I
Mm.
think I had further harmonized myself. It was mindset and it was fitness and it was nutrition, but it wasn't speaking to the nuance and the depth of understanding and the clarity that I think I had arrived at inadvertently through the birthing of second children and pandemics and all the stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
And so I decided to abandon the book altogether.
Wow.
Through this whole process, I'd gone through like a lawsuit with my old publishing house to come out of the whole thing with my intellectual property. It was like a mess. It
Oh
was a
my
mess, but there's
gosh.
no reason to go into too much of that.
Fair enough.
What I will say is that I found a new publishing house and, decided I was going to abandon that last book and just start anew with a new book one day. And then in July, I don't know, something happened. I don't want to say it was an epiphany because those just feel fake and phony, but I had a moment where all of a sudden I was like, no, there's truth here that hasn't gone deep enough and has not been re sort of evaluated or repurposed through my new lens, but
Mm.
there is goodness here. And I wrote a new book in 26 days.
Wow.
Yeah,
The most aligned book.
the most aligned book. It just vomited out of me. It
Wow.
was kind of reminded me of that like movie Limitless. Have you seen
Yeah.
it? Where you're just like, and then for like 26 days straight, I was just this like
Okay.
crazy, techie at the computer, just brrr, and it came out and it was fascinating, but it really was, I think, the right moment for that to happen.
Mm.
And Simona, what I'll say is actually probably not what most authors say after they've written a book that they believe is the book that needed to come together, because it happened and I did believe it, and it is the piece that was supposed to come. But it's interesting because even when you have that alignment, that clarity, that birthing of this thing that you feel really strongly about, when you come out the other side, it's still very disorienting because the book that I wrote is not written for the journey that I'm on now. The content is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
The mindset work is very similar, but the experiences that I'm having with that mindset work are through a vastly different lens than my relationship with my body. The book that I was writing was for who I used to be, the girl that I was, the girls out there, the people out there who are on the journey
Mm-hmm.
at that inflection point that I was experiencing at that time in my life. And what's interesting is that when you write that book for who you used to be, it's wild to then read it as the person you are now, because you're like, wait a minute, though. This is all so obvious. Why does any of this need to be said anymore? Actually, let's weave this and this and this and this into it and go deeper and deeper and deeper, because that's the journey you're on now. And you've learned so much more and you've harmonized so much more. And it's what you want to bring to everybody else. But
Mm.
it is the book that was meant to come out. It has come out, which is so wonderful and exciting. And I launched myself into the journey looking for validation and credibility. And what I came out with was a vehicle to uncover and unlayer and find so much more of my truth to be able to share with so many who are struggling with the journey that I've been on, that you've been on, with the I'll Start Again Tomorrow narrative, in order to, I think, just provide people with hope and with deep understanding that they're not alone in these quiet, shameful narratives that they have. The fear, the toxicity, the shame, everything that we experience quietly in silence because we're too busy putting a face on for the world. I think for me, the book was really important because it allowed me to put all of that down on paper so that anybody at any time could open it and be like, oh my God, she was just as messed up. And not to say amazing, we're all messed up, so therefore end of discussion. But okay, so take a breath,
Mm-hmm.
take a pause, come back to who you really are, and let's get back to doing the real work, not the fake work.
I think this is so beautiful. And I think the part that really kind of captured me there for a second was the you're not alone piece of this. Because I think and I feel when we go through this journey of life, it can feel very lonely, right? It can feel
So
like people
lonely.
don't understand
Yeah.
who we are and how we are. And if we change too much, then we're unrecognizable. How do other people catch up to us when we've changed? And
Yeah.
then how do we make sure that we can extend like grace and understanding to people who have not caught up
Oh,
yet? But then what
yes.
does that mean for the rest of your life?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Do you sit in that
Exactly.
place of
Yes. And how do you balance that dichotomy, right?
exactly?
How do you keep growing and evolving and living for yourself while not burning the foundation down to the ground every iteration of your journey, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. And I think, when it comes to our relationships with our bodies, we are all dealing with the same mess. In some variation or another, we are all dealing with the same fears, the same tactics, the same punishment
Mhm.
cycles, the same self sabotage. And yet we are looking out there with these like rose color goggles being like, oh my God. And like that Fitspo online. And oh my God, these kale chip recipes. And everybody seems to have their shit together. And, we're the only ones struggling. And I find when it comes to, health and wellness experts or, fitness and nutrition experts or whatever you want to call them, we look at them as if they're these anomalies, right? These
Mhm.
these genetic mutant beings who have just like cracked the code. They've got their shit together. They just know what's what. And so we salivate over their words and their directions and their feedback and advice, and we love it. And yet we also hate it because it makes
Mhm.
us feel more and more damaged.
Mhm.
Because like, well, why can't we be that healed? Why can't we be that fixed? Not recognizing that like they all have gone through tumultuous journeys to get to their level of understanding and insight. And
Mhm.
the journey never ends. But yes, they've gotten to a place where they can probably experience goodness and harmony and happiness, like we said, in their relationship with their body. But for me, the biggest piece about the book was that I didn't want to come at this being like, okay, guys, so like, I've got some answers and I just want to like help those of you who seem a little bit messed up get to this amazing place that I've gone to without being like, do you want to know how bad it was? Do you want to know how dark it got? Do you want to know how many times I did this again and again and
Mm.
again and again until I hit my breaking point and then I broke further and then I broke further? So that I think that loneliness piece, that resistance, that feeling that we get when we read self-help books, which is, oh my God, this is amazing and everything I've needed to hear, but also I'm so messed up. I'm so messed up. I'm never going to be able to overcome how messed up I am. That split version of reality that we experience when we're reading books that are both inspiring and also making us feel more and more damaged. I think that was the piece that I just was really trying to protect for my
Mm.
readers because
Yes.
to be honest, it's everything I needed to hear.
Mhm. It's a really big permission slip. And I want to tell you a story really quick too, because I feel like it's so interesting. As someone who's like, I've never really been into health and fitness. I've never really, worried about my diet or anything like that. And, as you get older, people tell you, oh, be careful because as you get older, your body changes and the way that you hold food in change above all that stuff. Right. And
Thanks.
so when I was younger, like I was always very, very slim. Okay.
Mhm.
When I was younger and whatever, probably up until right before the pandemic, I was in the gym, I don't know, 4 or 5 times a week. It was like
Great.
clockwork, right? I would
Yep.
just go to work. I would come home from
Autopilot.
work, go straight to the gym, and then I would
Mhm.
go home and do my thing, work on my business and whatever. Because at the time I was still working in corporate. Since the pandemic started until now, I've gained 25 pounds. Okay.
No.
Yes,
Wow.
I know. Trust
Incredible.
me. No.
Well, I say incredible
It's
because first of all, incredible that you're honest enough to share that. I think a lot of
true.
people yes, it's cute in some ways to be like, oh, the pandemic 25, but to really be like, I didn't say it was the pandemic 25. I said it has
No,
it
this
has
is like
been
the
that it is still here. I say
it's not
incredible, not
gone
because I'm like
25.
so happy for you, but rather that is a big shift. And it is something
Mm,
that leads to so much transformation, whether it's feeling good or not. So
yeah.
keep going with your story, but I'm
Thanks.
so intrigued.
No, I really appreciate you saying that, because what I realized in that whole journey was that while I wasn't like thrilled about it, I still really liked who I was. You know what I mean? I
Wow.
really like who I am. Like, I think
That's
I'm a really nice
amazing.
person. Like, I
You
like the person
are.
that I am. Thank
I
you.
really like you. I don't even know you and I really
I
like you.
know.
Like I want to know you. That's how nice you
I
are.
know. I'm ready to drive out to Toronto and
I
have a
know.
couple
I'm
of
like, should
drinks.
we just like meet somewhere in the middle? Okay,
I
we'll do
think we
this
should.
later.
I think we
Continue. Go
should.
ahead.
I think we should. But so, what was interesting though, is all these stories that I told myself of, like, worthiness around love, worthiness around, being liked, or I don't know, making money, or all of the things,
Yeah.
like all of those different things. I felt like I was only worthy if it was in my previous body,
Yes.
if you will. And what I realized was I had somehow replaced this like feeling of worthiness, okay, with filling my days with things that could buy me that same feeling, if that makes any sense.
It
So
makes
where I
total
ended
sense.
up, let me tell you, is in this place where like the 25 pounds was not all in one year. Like, it's been
Of
gradual
course.
over
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right.
I got you.
And yeah. And so where it kind of ended up was it was me filling my time with all of these different things that brought so much stress to my life that my body doesn't even recognize when it's stressed anymore, because there's an always like an underlying stress of the time. But it's interesting because when I think about body image and I think of how I look and, whatever, in my mind, I have a different image of who I am.
Yeah.
And then when I see pictures, I'm like, who
What
the
is
fuck is
that?
this?
Who is
I'm
that?
like, who the
Yeah.
hell is this?
Yeah.
And like, there's nothing wrong with the way that I look, like, whatever.
You look
But what it
amazing.
has also done is sparked an entire journey of, do I actually enjoy drinking alcohol? Not
Yes.
really. You know what I mean? Like, do I
Yes.
enjoy going out to eat all the time? No, not really. Do I
Yes.
enjoy just spending my time aimlessly, whatever, doing this? Not really.
Mm-mm.
And so since that whole time, I've actually lost 5 of the 25, which is good.
Great.
But what it feels like this time compared to any other time is that it feels like a coming home to myself in a different way, that it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because
No.
people are not going to remember me for my size at any size that I've ever been. It's really about who you are on the inside. And I wish that people could see that as a transformational piece in their own body image journey,
Yeah.
because it really doesn't matter at the end of the
No.
day. No one likes you more if you're smaller,
No,
genuinely.
it's true. In fact, people potentially arguably like you less if you're smaller,
Yeah,
just
fair.
because it's hard for people to feel good about themselves when other people are reflecting different
Mm,
images back to them, right? So
very
I
true.
can see how I can see how this has been quite a journey for you.
Mm,
And I love what you're saying just about the fact that, you know, it feels different this time around, that it's like a coming home to yourself, like you're evaluating things differently around what do you even like? What do you even value? What does make you feel good? And, something you said there around just the fact that stress had become such an inherent part of your vibration that you
mm.
couldn't even feel it anymore. I mean, to say that I like almost leaped out of my chair and then like pounced on you and was like, oh my God, me too, would be an understatement. Again, it's like in each iteration of your journey, you come to a deeper understanding. But for me, I cannot relate to that more
Mm,
because I think in the chasing of the body and the chasing of the career and the chasing of the relationships and the money and the everything outside of ourselves, what happens is that we are running hard and we're running fast and we are stressed and we are in some version of fight or flight, and it does become our base state, but we sacrifice that knowing because we're like, it's fine because once I get there, then I'm going to slow down, then I'm going to relax, then I will find peace. And we know that that never comes. There is no moment where we get to course correct and then feel good finally.
mhm,
But what we do is we create an environment that becomes so insidious that breaking out of it feels so hard. And so
mhm,
that stress foundation that you talk about, that's something that I'm working on so deeply now because, in each version of reality, fine, I'm no longer chasing happiness out there, but you still have these ideas that, okay, there's going to come a time where I feel a little bit more settled, a little bit calmer, a little bit like I can take my hands off the wheel just a smidge with the safety and knowing that I'm okay and that everything's going to be okay. But when we talk about that fear that you mentioned in the beginning, just being so driven by that fear, I think that's the piece that is such a driver for all of us in so many ways, where
Mm-hmm.
we're overriding all of the information, the data, the facts, the signals, the cues, the do I even like drinking, the
Mm-hmm.
curiosity that we can approach ourselves with, because we're in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when we get out of that is exactly what you're doing, which is like, turns out I've been doing all sorts of things that have actually been totally misaligned with how I really want to either look or feel or be or whatever. And letting go of those things, it's actually not that hard, because
So
turns
true.
out I wasn't listening to myself before. And now that
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening, aligned action doesn't feel so hard, right?
That is so true. And one key thing that you talked about right there was this idea of safety.
Oh,
And I mean, genuinely, I could talk to you for hours and
same here.
hours. And I don't even want this conversation to end, but I know that it's going to have to at some point. But I want to sort of share this thought. Would love to hear your thoughts. And I have one more question for you. And then I want to hear where we can buy your book and all of those amazing things. But the idea of safety, I think the biggest shift that's happened between the last, I want to say almost 4 years, maybe 3 years, then and now, because I look at life right now as like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, like really,
Yeah.
because I feel like my life did a 180, not just in the fact that we were all home all the time. Like it really, yes, like all of that time existed and that all happened.
Yeah.
And like it was a very difficult time. And also, I feel like that was like a big shift for me just in my life in general.
Yeah.
But everything in my life that I had considered as safety
Mm-hmm.
got ripped from right
Yes.
underneath
Yes.
me. And
Yes.
so it was about rebuilding all of those different safety cues and like realizing them, that
Yes.
I feel unsafe in my body. I feel unsafe in my relationship. I feel unsafe in my home. I feel unsafe. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel unsafe in my job, in money, and all these different things. And so it was kind of like this like thing that like came crashing down. And so it's like, we're so hard on ourselves, but what does your body have any other choice of doing than responding in a way that is obvious?
Yes.
Like it was so obvious that my body would
Yes.
respond to this. Like, where's that stress going to go? Like, just be like, oh,
100%.
it doesn't exist. No, it does, because you have to rebuild, you
You
know?
have to rebuild. Yeah. Yes. And I think it's, when you say it, you're like, it's so obvious. And you're like, and yet,
Hmm.
look at what we do to mask, to cover, to shield ourselves from that connection and that
Mm-hmm.
understanding. Right. And again, I feel like we're going to need 18 more episodes
1,000%. You're
on
coming
safety.
back. So
Yeah.
you're
Thank
already,
you.
you're already coming back. So that's fine.
Amazing. But I really do think so, because again, it's like, okay, there's the book, which is so key. And then there's the journey that I'm on now. And the awareness around how unsafe I feel in every aspect of my existence is only becoming clearer and clearer. And I don't know where the journey really goes, but what I'm really realizing, I think, right now at this phase is that the safety comes from within. And if I had spent 25 to 30 years of my life chasing and betraying myself for the purposes of external victories and validation and worthiness that's coming at me from my family and friends and whatever, and overriding every aspect of who I am in order to get there, then why would I feel safe in my body when I have been the one betraying myself for so
Hmm.
long? And I think it's really interesting when you can go there and really start to create that mind body connection at a deeper level. Because what you realize is, not to make this like dark and heavy, like there are consequences to the fact that you've been on the hamster wheel of weight loss all your life, like you're screwed. Not at all. But rather that all of that experience that you've had, all of the roller coaster experiences that you've gone through, whether it's about your body or about the career or about the life or the partner or the whatever, or the, the calling off of the wedding or getting divorced or any version of it, all of that is held in the body, right? And it is a part of who you are now, no matter what you've overcome. And to be able to really honor and look at those experiences for what they were, to be able to then move forward with deeper understanding and deeper insight into who you are and what you want now for real. I think that becomes, yes, it's painful to have gone through and painful to continue going through, but it becomes a beautiful uncovering
Mm-hmm.
of finding your way to that safety and to that trust with yourself and to that environment that you have within that feels truly supportive. And I don't know if I can say that most of us have that. And
Mm-hmm.
so work in progress, you know?
Work in progress. Evolution is the word that comes to mind for me.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. I have to ask you, where can my listener find you and
Oh,
buy your
you're
book?
so
And then I
sweet.
have one more question for
Sure.
you before.
I'm on socials at soniajhas.com. So, or .com. I mean, I guess that's my website. Here we go. But Sonia Jhas, and it's SoniaJhas. And as far as the book, I mean, it's sold essentially everywhere where books are sold. So everywhere online globally. And then the audiobook comes out in another week, which
Amazing.
is exciting because it's a fun book to read, but it's very heavily written in my voice. And so having me narrate it is also like a lazy but really fun way to do it. So I recommend it. And then there's also like the ebook and the whatever everywhere online. So it's straightforward. And in terms of socials, my DMs are always open. And I am very motivated to just, dive into the nuance of the discussion. So feel
Mm.
free to always reach out and connect.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay, so my last question for you. It's a question I have been asking for 3 years on this show, and I actually don't really, I think I've maybe gotten the same answer, like maybe twice. I think my listeners would probably tell me, like, Simona, you say this every single episode that you don't get the same answer twice, but like you have maybe gotten the same answer twice before. I don't know. We'll see.
Wow.
But it is, how can someone create a little more happiness in their day, every day, starting today?
Be willing to connect. Ask yourself in the moment, what could feel good? What could feel good? And then don't judge it. Don't evaluate it. Don't worry about if it sounds big enough or small enough. Don't worry about if it's going to be productive or if it's self care oriented or self development oriented. Connect with yourself and also find out while you're connecting with yourself by getting curious which part of you needs what?
Hmm.
Which part of you needs what? Which part of you needs something in this moment to make it feel a little lighter, a little better, a little tastier, a little bit more enjoyable? And, you know, inherently, as I was saying earlier, when you live a life where you're overriding all the time, chasing, you miss all the cues that your body and that your mind are giving you around, like, oh, maybe I like this, maybe I could want this or whatever. But when you stop to listen, you realize there's a way to make everything just a little bit sweeter in every moment. And it doesn't take much. Like, did I eat food out of the box or did I put it in a plate that felt like, I don't know, that would feel like just 2% better? And what I've realized is that, we search for these big happy moments and we try to do these big practices on a daily basis that are going to make us feel happier. When really the culmination of some really simple dropped in moments throughout the day where we honor how we're feeling and what we need can create that sense of momentary joy, that peace, that happiness. And I think that's the biggest thing, knowing also that happiness in my mind is like a skill that you have to hone. It's not a destination. And the more that you can reframe how you're expecting to experience happiness, the more you can cultivate more of it today so that you can feel more of it tomorrow. And something as simple as writing down the good moments as they happen throughout the day, as opposed to waiting to nighttime to capture your like phony gratitude about your day, for me has been a simple tool that's been game changing because it's like, you know what? I'm predisposed to being negative. I'm predisposed to the vortex. But if I had a good feeling, I did something that I was proud of, I showed up for something, there was a moment that felt aligned, I write it down and I like give myself a second to just feel it, like for real in the bod. and then I move on and I get back to work, right? So it's, to me,
I love that.
the simple, small moments to connect, to honor what's coming up, to do that 2% that you can do to cater to that version of you that needs whatever, and then to capture the good feelings as they come so you don't forget about them when you're stressed out after your kids go to bed.
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you. Oh, it was such a delight. I'm your biggest fan, and I look forward to connecting again, my friend.
I know, me too. I'm so excited to have you back. I know my listeners are going to want to have you back again. So if there's something you want to hear in particular, you guys, if there's something that you want Sonia to talk about,
let me know.
Just let us know and I'll bring her back on the show and we will have that conversation. And so thank you so much, Sonia. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode of the Happiness Happens podcast. I'm so grateful for you that you joined in this conversation. And remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.
Love it.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I learned so much and I hope you did too. Be sure to tag me on social media so that I know that you're listening too. If you love what you heard, please leave a rating and review. It would mean the absolute world to me. See you on the next one, and until then, remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.